Hello, everyone. Hi. Good evening. Good evening. I am Romina. I work for Macmillan Education. Some of you, I think, already know me because we always meet in these sessions, online sessions. So, hello. Hi, everyone. I can see already lots of people commenting in the chat. Just to check that everything is working properly. Sorry, I just would like to confirm that everyone can hear me properly, and just to check if the chat box works fine. My usual question: where are you writing from? Okay, Laura already knows because she says hello from Umbria. Great. I am from Monza, and here today, unfortunately, it's raining a lot. So not very good weather here. But luckily, okay, Florence, Bologna, Empoli, Milan. So I hope in some parts of Italy the weather is better than here. Unfortunately, I think the north of Italy is not very lucky today. So I just would like to welcome everybody and to remind you that this session will be available for you, and the recording of this session will be available for you on YouTube, so on the Mondadori Education channel, and that you are going to receive your certificate and you're going to see your certificate on mondadorieducation.it/attestati. So right now, I would like to welcome our fantastic speaker, David Spencer.
Hello.
Hi, Dave. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, very wet here. Very wet, windy.
The same, unfortunately.
The same as in Turin, I can see from Malta's maybe comment, but yeah, cloudy, wet, and cold. Exactly the same.
Yes. Yeah, the north of Italy in these days is a little bit wet, unfortunately. And so today, Dave is going to talk about Oracy, a very interesting topic, I have to say. But first, before starting, we would like to tell you and inform everybody that we are going to see Dave live in in a month, more or less a month, because we're going to have the Macmillan Days face-to-face workshops in Italy from the 24th of February to the 28th of February. We're going to have two great speakers. One is Dave, obviously. The other one is Emma Heiderman, who is another author, and she is the writer of our series Upskill, whereas Dave is the writer of Gateway, the first edition, then the second edition, now the third edition, Gateway to the World. And he's also collaborated, obviously, with Gateway Think Global, which is the Italian version, or, well, the localized version, we like to call it in this way. So we really hope that you're going to join us in this during this event. And now our colleague is going to put the website where you can register. So in a couple of seconds, you're gonna see the link. I can see, meanwhile, lots of people. All right, lots of people explaining where they're from. As you can see, the link is here, and the cities are going to be Naples on the 24th, Padova on the 25th, Ancona on the 26th, Florence on the 27th, and Milan on the 28th. So we are really happy to welcome you there as well. But without further ado, Dave, the stage is yours. So thank you very much, everybody. I will be here if you need me, and I'm gonna collect all of your questions. So see you at the end, and we're gonna have a little Q&A session before saying goodbye.
Great. Thanks a lot, Romina. Thank you very much. Yes. So thank you, first of all, for joining me. Obviously, it's 6 o'clock here in Spain, and I imagine 6 o'clock where you are too. And yeah, it's great news. I'm very, very excited to be coming back to Italy in about 3 weeks. Yes. And I've been, of course, I've given talks in Naples before, and Milan and Florence. But yeah, Padova and Conano is the other place that we're going to. Very excited about going there. Just so that you know, this will be my 7th trip to give talks in Italy. So yes, it feels like home from home, traveling to Italy. And also I was looking, but this is my 10th special webinar for Italy too. So yes, I feel part of the Mondadori Macmillan education family. A real pleasure to be with you. In case you don't know, I'm still a teacher. I teach in Spain. I've been teaching for approximately 37 years now. I've been writing books for approximately 30 years now too. And yeah, I've visited, I think, over 30 countries giving talks. And this is my first ever talk about a very interesting topic, oracy. I would love to go to Turin as well. And I have been and given talks in Turin. I expect it's difficult to cover every city in Italy, but we'll try. One day we'll be back. Oracy. We're talking about oracy, improving students speaking and thinking the easy way. I think it's very interesting. We obviously talk a lot about literacy, learning to read and write. And we talk a lot about numeracy, obviously learning about numbers, learning about maths. And I think that literacy and numeracy have been the pillars of education for centuries, I suppose. People have always taught the skills of reading, writing, and numbers. And oracy is a relatively new concept, I think. So I want to begin by giving a simple explanation of what we are talking about. The person who invented this expression is somebody called Andrew Wilkinson, and he defined it as the ability to use the oral skills of speaking and listening. And yes, Maria, it's an underrated skill. Yes. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. It's so underrated, I think, that now, for example, the government in the UK, particularly, I think, after COVID, is very, very worried about the development of oracy. So this is an all-party parliamentary group. So that means that politicians from all the different parties have come together to talk about this question. So that shows that it's important. They define oracy as the ability to articulate ideas, develop understanding, and engage with others through social language. And a very important point, which I'm going to say again and again today in this talk, the ability to communicate effectively is an essential ingredient to both success in school and beyond. In other words, oracy is actually, I would say, a life skill, particularly important at school, very important at university, but also important at work and at the home, with friends even. In other words, oracy is a real complete life skill. Now, one important thing to make clear before I go any further is that when people talk about oracy, when the parliamentary groups in the UK talk about oracy, they're talking about the ability to communicate orally in English for English children. We're not talking at the moment about a foreign language. We're talking about learning to express yourself in your own language, to speak and express yourself in your own language. And I think that's very, very important. It's an important concept to kind of bear in mind. And I've got a question for you now, really. Is it true or is it not true that native speakers can use the oral skills of speaking and listening? In other words, can't all children in their own language, can't they all speak and listen well? Can't they all communicate effectively? Can't they all articulate ideas in their own language? And can't they all engage with others through social language? So that's a real question. Can they do this or not? Can native speakers do it? And I'd like you to tell me in the chat box. Thank you, Anna and Alessandro. Not true, not at all. Monica says, not at all. Not given for granted. I like that expression, Anna Maria, not given for granted. The point that I want to make is I think that we often do take it for granted that all children learn to express themselves well, to communicate effectively by speaking. Obviously, not all children read or learn to read at the same speed. Not all children learn to write at the same speed. But we would sometimes, I think, imagine that we all learn to speak kind of immediately in your own language. Right. So, and that was my next question. Why do you think either yes or no? So Maria has said it's a skill which needs to be developed. Right. Simona, they do have problems when interacting. Right. Okay. So oracy, when we're saying, is not just speaking, right, but we're saying communicating effectively and expressing, for example, complex ideas effectively through speaking and listening. Morena, that's a very interesting point that you've just said there. We're losing it. Okay. And Monica, I agree totally. We should connect language to the ability of thinking. And that's what we're going to do today in this session, to kind of see a connection between thinking and speaking. Right. And Ketty, that's an interesting point as well. It's a question of attitude. Well, certainly, I don't think that all children do learn the skills of oracy. And maybe here are some reasons why I think teens today interact less, maybe because of new technologies. And as I said before, I think one of the questions here is that the effect of COVID, where people were isolated, obviously the tendency of teenagers today to be a little bit obsessed with their mobile phones, with tablets, with laptops, with screens. Maybe today teenagers are interacting orally less because of this. Now, an interesting point also is that maybe the quality of talk in homes can vary a lot. What do I mean? I mean that I know that in some homes, for example, let's imagine dinner time. I'm sure there are many families where the family sits around a table, has dinner and discusses things, discussing news, discussing things that have happened to everybody in the family. And some families will maybe speak more than others. And I think this is an interesting point. Particularly, I would say, I'm going to make a generalization, but in the UK, there are many families where the family does not even eat together. They simply eat individually. They're still watching television. They're still watching screens, and they're not interacting through speech. I think, as somebody mentioned, a very good point about words, about lack of vocabulary. I can't remember, sorry, which teacher made this point, but I agree. I think that some students read a lot, but it is true also that some students read a lot less than in the past. They may not pick up like a novel, a book, magazines. And that could also lead them to have less specific vocabulary, less complex vocabulary. And Sylvia, the point that you're saying about L2, this is the point that I'm making. Yeah, we're talking at the moment still about L1, not even L2. So we're saying that this would be for example, UK children speaking English too. And again, you can tell me in the chat box if you agree or disagree, but I think that there is some truth to the comment that students today, some students are less willing to contribute during lessons, and maybe they only give very short answers to our questions. Maybe this is a problem of us as teachers that we're not asking the right questions. And I will come to this point later, thinking about how teachers, with our questioning and our language, can encourage more speaking from the students. So at the moment, I'm talking about the UK, and it seems very clear to me from the chat box that you're saying that it's similar for teenage students in Italy too, right? That maybe Oracy is a skill that is slightly being lost for different reasons. The interesting thing is, as I said, as a teacher said before, this thing about taking it for granted. This is a very interesting article about Oracy, learning how to talk and learning through talk. So it says here, if young people lack certain listening and speaking skills, should we expect them just to pick them up? We don't expect that with literacy or numeracy skills. Few children catch on to spelling long division without a bit of input. In other words, what they're saying in this study of Oracy is that we don't expect children just to learn to read on their own, to learn to write on their own, or to learn to do mathematical problems on their own. So why should we expect students to pick up Oracy? By the way, this is a joke, okay? But we talk about spelling. Of course, spelling is difficult in English. I'd like you to have a look at this for a second. I find this very funny. This was a spelling test with an English child. He or she got every word wrong except for one word. Isn't this funny? This is irony, ironic. The only word that they managed to spell correctly is the word illiterate, right? The point again would be that we can't expect children to learn to spell without helping them. We can't then expect students to pick up Oracy. And the article that I mentioned before finishes with a very strong comment. With spoken language, if we just cross our fingers and leave them to it, what will become of them? Very interesting question. In other words, we expect to teach literacy, we expect to teach numeracy, and right now in the 2025, I think it's very clear that we should also expect to teach Oracy too. Now, of course, if native speakers need to learn to communicate through speaking and to communicate effectively speaking and listening, what about our students who are learning a second language? So I teach in Spain. My Spanish students maybe need help with Oracy in Spanish, but what about in English? Well, I think it's obvious that they need that help, right? If they need it in their L1, they also need it in their L2. Now, I think that there's some good news here. So the good news, in my opinion, is that I believe, and this will be my argument today throughout the session, is that I believe that we, in our English language lessons, EFL lessons, I believe we do lots of things to help students to develop their Oracy. We help them a lot to develop their Oracy in English, and I believe that that can also help our students in this case, your students, with their Italian. And I'm going to give you some examples of how I think we do this already. Now, when I learned French and Spanish when I was a teenager, I loved French and Spanish, and I continued studying at Oxford University, so I loved studying languages. But this quotation from Michael Swan was very much the way that I learned French and Spanish. And this is totally true. The first time I arrived in Spain, I could read Don Quixote by Cervantes, but I couldn't ask for a coffee. I made a mistake when I asked for a coffee. He can recite long lists of irregular verbs, but he can't ask for a cup of coffee. That is what we, I think, people who are as old as me, We used to learn languages by learning only the grammar and learning translation, but not learning speaking and listening. And luckily, that changed quite some time ago. And if you think about the way that we teach grammar in our modern English language textbooks, like Gateway to the World, we begin with grammar analysis. We continue with very structured practice. But then if you look at the last exercise there, it says use it, don't lose it. And the idea is always to make sure that the students practice using that grammar in oral situations, so they're developing and actually using the grammar in a kind of functional way, in a communicative way, and they are expressing themselves with this new grammar. So I think that that's great that today, of course, we don't just teach grammar for grammar's sake, we teach grammar as communication. By the way, when I'm traveling to 5 Italian cities at the end of this month or at the end of February, I will be talking about lots of great things you can do in your class to teach grammar, okay? But I think the biggest change in grammar, right, Ketty, that's interesting. So the same thing happened to you. I think that's very common, right? That languages used to be taught through grammar translation and not through communicative practice and speaking practice. Now, of course, in our English language textbooks, we also teach the skill of speaking, and we break it down. I'm not going to go through this page, but we go through different stages where, again, the students listen, they have a model, we analyze the expressions that they need to use to be able to do the function that we are teaching. In other words, we break down the speaking skill in a very structured, scaffolded way, in a very helpful way. And I kind of wonder whether maybe even approaches like this may sometimes even be necessary when teaching younger learners L1. That's, maybe you might agree or disagree with me there, but I think the way that we do it in a very systematic way, a very scaffolded way, like I said, I think is very, very useful for students to be able to have more confidence when speaking. This is an example from, Romina mentioned, there is a new Mondadori edition of Gateway Think Global, and there is a special little booklet I can show you here. Okay, so there's this booklet, but this booklet has got lots of really structured practice for speaking. And I think that with teenagers, often the question is knowing what to say, and then also having some kind of framework that can help them to have more confidence to express themselves. And so that's what we're doing here. So the point that I'm trying to make is that in your English language classes, English as a foreign language, I'm sure you're teaching your students in a very structured way to use the language that they're learning and to be able to express themselves well. Now, if we talk about teaching Oracy as a new kind of skill, as it were, I think we need some kind of framework. Yes, Alice, I agree. Confidence is definitely, and I think confidence, personally, I think confidence will need building not only in English lessons, but also in L1 lessons, right? Because teenagers often have sort of a shyness that impedes communication also in their L1. What I'm going to do in this talk now is look at these 4 different areas that you can see on your screen. I'm sure, by the way, that we can share PDFs of this presentation so that you can look at this again afterwards and think about it in more detail. But basically, the English Speaking Union has divided the skills needed for Oracy into 4 different areas: reasoning and evidence, organizing and prioritization, listening and response, expression and delivery. What does this mean? Well, we're going to go through these 4 areas and we're going to look at the skills that are involved. So the first one, reasoning and evidence. A persuasive speaker presents their reasons in a clear, well-structured manner, gives priority to the main arguments, and has a structure which is clearly communicated to the audience. Now, imagine that your students are going to give a presentation. Now, again, I think this is I'm going to repeat myself a lot in this talk, but I think that all the things that I'm showing you are things that will help the students in English and also in their L1. Because if the students have to give a presentation in, for example, again, in Italian, are they ready for that presentation? I'm not sure what, for example, in my case, Spanish language teachers, I'm not sure what they teach, but I think that what I'm going to show you now is something that would be very useful for the students in any language. So I'm going to break it down quickly how this page works. What we've got, the first activity is looking at a statement and getting the students simply to think about some ideas. So I think some of you have already said the same thing, that the problem is that teenagers sometimes are lacking ideas. Not only do they have problems expressing themselves, but they don't know what to say. The question here, if you can read that, it says students don't need to learn to write by hand anymore because in the 21st century, it's not really necessary. Actually, maybe in the chat box, could you just sort of like say if you agree or disagree with that statement, and see if you can give any ideas about why. And this is what we would do with the students. First of all, getting them to think of some ideas. And that's going to kick off the whole page, getting students to think. So should students learn to write by hand if they spend all day with mobile phones, tablets and laptops? In Finland, apparently, they have stopped handwriting because they say it's no longer necessary. So that's an interesting question to get the students thinking. Then what we do is we get the students to listen to somebody giving a presentation. And I think that the important thing here is giving the students a model. That way they know what we expect from them. That way they know what we want to get from them. If they don't have a model, I think it's a mystery sometimes for students to decide what exactly they have to do. So the students listen to somebody giving a presentation, and then we analyze the useful language that they need to give a presentation, the scaffolding that I mentioned before. And again, I'd be interested to know if in the students L1, teachers give this kind of scaffolding. The next thing is we've got different stages of a presentation and the students have to put them in order. So we've got different points there. I'm not going to go through all of them, but for example, look carefully at the question, make notes, begin your presentation and look up at the audience. Think of a short introduction and a conclusion. If you remember, the English Speaking Union said that a persuasive speaker is somebody who structures their presentation. And so what we do here is we give them the presentation steps out of order and get the students to think, analyze, and put them in the correct order. So they're really learning to think about, okay, how do I give a presentation? What's the first stage? What's the second stage? What's the third stage? Then we also have an exam tip, and this is getting the students to think about their voice when they give a presentation, about the position of their body language, and also thinking about visuals that you might need and what kind of language you need. So we're really being totally complete in the support that we're giving the students when they have to give their presentation. We're doing all of the work before they begin so that they know exactly what they have to do. And then we've got choice. I watched Emma's lovely session before my session, which was at 4 o'clock. And she mentioned the element of choice for teenagers, letting them choose, giving them some element of choice always improves motivation. And in this case, the students can choose what they are going to give a presentation about. And that's really going to improve their motivation because they have taken the decision, they have had the power to choose what they're going to talk about. Alda, I agree, they're not aware of their body language. And again, this is something which is not just L2, this is also L1. And I'm going to mention body language in a second. And finally, after all of this presentation, after all of this scaffolding, we ask the students to prepare and to give their presentation. Now, the main point that I want to make about this is we take the students step by step so they don't have the possibility really of getting lost. We're building their confidence, we're feeding in the language that they need, and this is going to lead to a successful presentation. And I think that this is exactly preparing those oracy skills that are mentioned by the English Speaking Union to improve oracy in native speaker English children. So I think that what we're doing is a very sensible and a very complete, a very thorough way of going about developing articulate speaking. Okay, the second area is expression and delivery. And we've mentioned some of these points already. A persuasive speaker speaks with confidence as indicated by voice, body language, volume of their voice, and the use of notes for reference rather than reading a script. And again, I have seen some of my Spanish students giving presentations in science classes, and they often look at their shoes, they stare at the floor, they don't look up. They're looking at their notes, they're reading their notes, but they're not looking at the audience, they're not standing, and they're not looking particularly confident. So these are all things that if we can teach our students in English lessons, I would say that these are life skills that will be very useful for them at school in every subject and also at university. A persuasive speaker engages the audience with variations in the tone and volume of their voice. Lorella, that's a very good point about debate practice. And hopefully we're going to see a video of a debate, which I think is really interesting in the UK with teenagers. So varying your tone, varying the volume of your voice, speaking clearly, speaking confidently, speaking fluently. And finally, then, a persuasive speaker chooses vocabulary and sentence structure carefully. And this is something that I'm going to come back to a few times. Vocabulary and grammar. Vocabulary and grammar. Without vocabulary and grammar, the students are not going to give a good presentation, right? In other words, these things all go together. Feeding in new language, which is what we do in our English language lessons, and then getting the students to acquire more new vocabulary, more incisive vocabulary. So a lot of you are mentioning debates. So that's what we're going to look at now. This is again from Gateway to the World, B1+, and we've got a whole double page spread all about public speaking. And I think students are expected to do more and more public speaking at school. Now, here are some tips for public speaking. And again, these tips are useful in all kinds of lessons. Stand up straight and try to look confident. Use your hands, but not too much, right? Some students are always like moving their hands. So we want like maybe some use of hands, but not using them too much. Number 4, speak clearly, not too soft or too loud. And actually, number 8, prepare your talk carefully and practicing giving it. Now, I can tell you, you have to believe me, but on Friday, I practiced giving this talk. I practiced by speaking to myself with my PowerPoint slides. But even now, after giving webinars for, I think, over 10 years, I still practice giving talks myself. And I think that's good for our students to know. that they might think that, like, when you have done this for a while, you don't need to practice. But even somebody who's experienced still needs to practice, I think, giving talks and giving talks fluently with the correct speed and the correct volume of voice. Now, this section of the book, which is talking about debates and public speaking, also has a video. And the video here shows some real students from the UK in a debate team. And I'd like you to watch this. I think this is a great video. I love watching this video. Have a look at it and see if you think your students would enjoy watching it and if they could learn something by watching it. It's all about debating. If for some reason the video doesn't work very well, I will stop and I will explain what comes in the video. But fingers crossed, let's see if it works.
Melanie, Erin and Chelsea are part of the Kingsford School debate team. For 12 weeks, they have been talking about important topics and arguing for or against different ways of thinking. Soon, they will compete against another school in the final debate. But are they ready? Chelsea has strong opinions, but sometimes she can be a bit too angry.
Don't give me that face so like, oh, you're confused about what I'm saying because you know what I'm saying.
Chelsea.
Will she be able to stay calm in the final debate? Erin has good ideas, but she can be a nervous speaker.
If you go to a mixed school, then you kind of don't know where to go.
And finally, Melanie. She wants to study law at university.
I'm always right, even when I'm wrong.
After weeks of competitions, it's the day of the final debate between Kingsford School and Stretford School. The topic for debate is, should children be allowed to vote in government elections when they are 14 years old? The Kingsford School team think that 14 is too young. Meanwhile, Stretford School from Manchester believe that the voting age should be changed to 14. Kingsford School is first.
As teenagers, we have exams to worry about. We have school life to worry about. Why should we feel that we should be forced to be adults? Let us enjoy our teenager life.
And now, Stretford School.
Society has moved on. Young teenagers are taking on more adult activities. Why should voting not be included?
I'm 14 and I don't feel ready to vote. We don't go to school to learn about politics. We go to school to learn about English, math, science, key skills that we need in everyday life.
A confident argument. What did the opposite team have to say?
But voting is not hard. You choose a party you like and you vote. I am a 14-year-old and I am a citizen of the United Kingdom, and we have the right to decide our fate and future.
Some excellent points. Can future lawyer Melanie win the argument for Kingsford?
You said that voting isn't hard. You pick a party that you like and you vote. That shows that actually children our age don't know anything about politics, because I think that it's much more than that.
Both teams have worked hard and argued very well, and they've developed many new skills along the way. But there can only be one winner.
Kingsford.
Okay, I think you could see that. I love that video. I think it's good for different reasons. One of the reasons is not all of the presenters are perfect. And again, I think that maybe when students learn English as a foreign language, they believe that all, for example, English teenagers would speak perfectly and would explain themselves very, very articulately. And there are some good speakers in this video and some not so good speakers. And it gives a very realistic picture, I think, of how students in the UK could explain themselves. You could even try, actually, to debate the same topic, which I think is an interesting topic. Meanwhile, in the chat box, I've seen this kind of a discussion about presentations and about using AI to present the using AI to prepare the presentation. And I think, as one teacher has mentioned, Tiziana, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, sorry, Tiziana has mentioned that do's and don'ts. One of the do's should be that you cannot you cannot write out the whole presentation. You can only write notes. And I think that for me would be the key. So in other words, when a student gives a presentation, they only use notes, not a complete text. And in that case, the students do have to be able to to present their argument without using AI tools or anything else. Another point that I would make is that with any type of presentation, at the end, you can have questions where people ask the presenter questions. I think that's very important. And again, there, the student has not been able to simply prepare those answers beforehand. So personally, I think presentation is still a very useful tool in the classroom. You can avoid the AI problem by having notes and not complete texts. Debates, I think, are useful. Somebody mentioned it's about respecting turns, asking for the floor, balancing your answers. And I can see that Guidiana, I'm very sorry if I mispronounce your names. I'm really sorry. Unfortunately, we do not always deal with well-mannered and respectful folks. That's true, but I think it's good to try, right? And the rules of debate, I think, are quite nice, because it is kind of saying, respect. We'll come to this again actually later in my talk, but respect while somebody talks, then it's your turn, listen, and then reply. So I think debate and presentations, they're all good ways to help students to develop that ability to express difficult concepts. And it links also with this idea of speaking and thinking going hand in hand. Now, wait, have I done something to my screen? You can see that, but I'm not sure if you should be able to see it like that. Anyway, you can see it, right? If you can tell me that the presentation is fine, yeah? Wait. Right. I've done something to my own screen that I'm not sure that I should have done that. But anyway, I'll continue. You can see, okay, cool, right. Okay, good. As long as you can see, that's fine. I'm going to continue. We've got then this little lesson about body language. I'm not going to go into this into detail, but a few people have mentioned, I think, already this idea of the importance of teaching body language. This lesson is very interesting. It's from Gateway Think Global, but it's about body language in the digital age. Here, it is interesting, video conferencing. For example, if I was spending my time looking at my mobile phone, I think that would be very, how could I put it? It would be very off-putting for you, right? If you were simply seeing me looking at a mobile phone. So in other words, what we are doing here is we're teaching the skills here of body language, but body language in terms of digital presentations. Right, next slide. I'm going to show you, I'm running out of time a little bit, I think. I'm going slightly too slow. Something that I think is very important is this question here of how we affect the speaking in the class. I think there are two different ways that maybe in particular teachers talk. One is called authoritative presentation. And this basically means, for example, that the teacher is doing most of the talking. And by the way, webinars always lead to this. When I give a workshop face-to-face, I do a lot less of this. But a webinar means that I'm the person talking all the time. I can see comments in chat boxes, but apart from that, it is a question of the teacher doing the talking. Often what happens, and it's happening in this webinar, the teacher informs students about a subject through a prepared talk or lecture. So that's what I'm doing today. I've prepared this talk and I'm giving you this information. And then also the teacher instructs students on how to carry out some task or procedure. And the teacher checks student knowledge through specific questions about subject content. Now, I think that that's very clear that with authoritative presentation, what's happening most of the time is that the teacher is doing most of the talking. And if we're talking about oracy, I think that that means that basically the teacher is doing most of the talking, and we don't want that. We want the students to do the talking. Now, the alternative to authoritative presentation is interactive dialogue. And in this case, the teacher talks less. The teacher gives students opportunities to take long turns when talking and encourages students to discuss and question each other's ideas. They also avoid judging students' contributions as either right or wrong. They encourage students to ask questions about things they do not understand, and they encourage students to share their thoughts and reveal misunderstandings. Now, I think that this, also expecting students to justify their ideas with reasons, this is a great way of teaching. And I think it's a great way of teaching English. Asking the students questions, getting them engaged, getting them involved, getting the students to do most of the speaking. I think that is, for me, one of the main aims, if you like, of English language teaching. And I think that if we do this in our classes, which I'm sure many of you do, if you do this in your classes, then you are probably on the way to very much developing oracy with your students. And I think the great thing is that English teachers in general, we love doing this kind of work. We love doing pair work, group work, discussions, debates, brainstorming, presentations, debates, project work. And the more we do this kind of work, the more I am convinced we are developing the students' oracy. So in things like projects, then collaborative projects where we teach our students to collaborate together, when we teach them language that is useful to join together and to discuss things together, then we are really helping them along this line. And I think that maybe in many other subjects, if I think of how my colleagues teach history in the Spanish school where I work, I think there's the tendency of those teachers is to do the authoritative presentation and not this interactive talk, which I think is really powerful in English language lessons. The other great thing, and somebody's mentioned this before, is the correlation between speaking and thinking. And I think the great thing about English language classes is that we do like teaching thinking in our classes. We like encouraging our students to think creatively and to think critically. And I think one of the best ways that we can do this to develop students' thinking is very simple. It's using the question why. And I'm a big fan of this question why. You can see these examples of the question why. In my classes, I'm continually asking the students why. And this is really helping the students, first of all, to think, and it's also helping them to express their answers. Why are we doing this is one of my favorite questions in class. When we do an activity at the end, I like to ask the question, okay, so why did we do that activity? What was the purpose? And we're doing two things. We're getting the students to think critically, and we're also getting them to express their ideas, express their answers. And also another thing that we've mentioned in this interactive form of teaching, get students to ask the question why. And often at the end of a lesson, instead of saying, has anybody got a question, I prefer to ask the question, or to give the instruction, please ask me a question. Write down one question that you would like to ask me. And as I said, we're encouraging thinking, but we're also encouraging interaction, engagement, and speaking at the same time. Right, we talked about this Oracy framework from the English Speaking Union. Here is section number 3, which is about reasoning and evidence. A persuasive speaker chooses relevant statements to defend statements using clear logical reasons, and supports their arguments with well-explained evidence. And this is one activity for you to take away, chalk talk. So what we do is we ask a question, a debate topic, for example, should school start later for teenagers? And we give them some thinking time. Very important to have that thinking time. Then we ask the students to write their answers down on, for example, basically the blackboard, or it could be a large sheet of paper, or it could be using technology with a Google Doc, for example, that they can share. Then ask the students to read and reflect on other people's ideas. So we're getting them to think about what other people have said or written. And then finally begin this group discussion. And in this activity, we really are combining then both things. We're combining thinking of different arguments, backing up arguments, reflecting on other people's ideas, and then getting students to discuss those ideas. So it's really a question of giving thinking time and encouraging. I think a few of you have mentioned already in the chat box, students might not always come up with a lot of ideas. They might not have many ideas, but I think that these are first steps, if you like, on the way to getting them to slow and think in a little bit more depth. And that's what, again, Oracy, I think, is all about. This, it's talking, but it's talking about more complex ideas and getting them, above all, to justify their ideas. Okay, this is the last of the English Speaking Union points, listening and response. A persuasive speaker demonstrates attentive listening by engaging with the ideas of others, responds to others with precise analysis or questioning, and uses good judgment to select and respond to the most important arguments. Basically, in a nutshell, what we're saying here is that one of the most important skills of Oracy is not just speaking, it's listening and responding. And if any of you teach, for example, Cambridge exams, such as first or advanced, in the speaking exam, you'll know that it's just as important for the students to express themselves clearly as it is also for the students to be able to respond to their partner's comments, to either agree or disagree, and to show that they are interacting. So again, I think this skill from the Oracy framework is something which we are doing already in our English lessons. In this case, you can see this thinking routine: share, wait, think, discuss. And if you've looked at that, you'll see that the idea is simply that your partner is speaking, and while your partner is speaking, you remain in silence. Somebody mentioned before in the chat box that students don't respect one another when they are talking. And I agree. So what I think we need to do is to try and teach them this, the importance of this, and also to get them to practice it as a routine. Okay, I'm going to leave that slide just to point out that there are other ways of looking at Oracy. As I said before, I think you'll get a PDF, hopefully, of this presentation. You'll be able to look at this. This is from Cambridge International, and they have divided Oracy skills into these 4 areas. And if you get a chance to look at that, you'll find that all of those things are things that we have covered in this talk today, and also things that are often covered in good textbooks. Okay, some final thoughts just to finish. First of all, Oracy and communication still depend on teaching grammar and vocabulary. I'll be discussing this in my talks when I come to Italy at the end of February. We can communicate little without grammar. We can communicate nothing without vocabulary. In other words, Oracy does not mean that we stop teaching grammar and vocabulary. It's almost the opposite. We need to teach it more than ever, because without the right grammar and vocabulary, they will not be able to express themselves clearly. Oracy, as I hope we've seen in this talk, helps to develop learning and thinking in general. And because Oracy is a vital life skill, I think you'll find that Oracy is really important in the classroom, obviously, in all subjects, not just English, not just Italian. It's also important at university, giving presentations. It's important at work, where workers usually have to communicate clearly with other fellow workers, and obviously then in day-to-day life. And the really great news, which I've tried to share a few times in this talk, is I really do believe that by teaching Oracy to teenagers in English lessons, we're also helping to boost their Oracy in Italian. Thanks so much for listening to me. This address for Facebook, if you're interested and you're on Facebook, then please do join me there. Over 10,000 teachers around the world are connected there, teachers of teenagers, and that is where I often share information. For example, I'll be sharing all the information about my upcoming Italian tour with Emma. So Romina, if you're there, I'm ready and finished.
Okay, here I am. Thank you. Thanks, Dave, for this. I was having a look at the chat, and everyone was very, very lively. So it was, I think it was very nice, because actually, really, the chat became an example of what you were talking about. So with very little input, well, very little input, no, but with, just an input, then you created a debate here in the chat. So it was very, very interesting.
Thank you. I would like to say a big thank you actually to everybody out there, because I could see there were lots of really very incisive, very, very intelligent and good comments about what we're talking about. And it's a shame that we can't, debate all of those topics again together, because obviously people have got questions or sometimes disagreeing, which is totally fine and normal. But yeah, thank you very much to everybody for their participation.
Thank you, everyone. And obviously, thank you, Dave, for this amazing session. I just wanted in a couple of minutes to ask you, well, we know the answer already, but if you maybe want to give a little bit more details. One of the questions was where they can find a video that you showed. So that's in Gateway,
right,
but
yes.
if you want to give details.
Obviously, yes, that video is from Gateway to the World. Obviously, those videos are their real videos, and I think that one is possibly a BBC video, but I'm not actually sure if we can give access to that, because I don't think it belongs to us in Gateway, but it's exactly. Not something that's. So unfortunately, you're going to have to look at Gateway. Obviously, if you have got Gateway, you've got the code there and all of those videos, because there are lots of good videos. I do like the video. I'm glad that people enjoyed it, because I think it is a very powerful video to show your students, sort of seeing British teenagers. By the way, I don't think those schools are like great schools either. The students are not like perfect students. but they look like a real student, which is great. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. And if just to add on this, if you wish to have a look at Gateway, you can always get in touch with the local agents that are. We have local agents in different cities, depending on the provinces and the regions. So if you're interested, you can always get in touch with the agents. And I just would like to remind you once again about the workshops that we're having in February from the 24th to the 28th, and through the website you can our colleague is sharing now. You can register, and we are going, during the live events, we are going to give you also some extra tips that you can then use on your in your classes, and also some gadgets as usual. So we are really looking forward to your participation. And then there were lots of comments. I just would like to wrap up a little bit, because I think they also have to go now. I'm just checking now if there are any final questions, but I can see lots of thank yous, and I can't agree more. So thank you, Dave, really.
I suppose if somebody did have, a burning question, do remember that you can always contact me directly through that Facebook page. So I always reply to everything. So, if anybody would like to, sort of make a point that I haven't been able to answer, then you can always contact me there.
Okay. Cinzia is saying that she couldn't find the link to register. Cinzia, if you need help, you can maybe send an email to the website, to Mondadori Education, the customer service. You can find that on the website, and they will give you all the details to register. So thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy your evening, and Dave will be in touch. And thank you again. Hope to see you soon.
Yes, very excited to meet some of you, hopefully in Italy very soon. Thanks for coming along today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy your evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.